Hey class, today we're going to continue our discussion and we're going to move into the 1980s. Again, this video is for supplemental material just so you can get full credit on your AP exam because one of the scoring criteria is to include things that are outside of the scope of the question, or at least that's one of the components of one of the scoring criteria. So I'm going to just continue this so that you have some more tools to be able to add outside material if the question is not in this time frame, which it's not going to be in this time frame because College Board is not testing in this time frame. But I want to make sure you have facts to firm up your answers to get all the points on the rubric. So we're talking about the new right today, and this is particularly in reference to the 1980 election and something akin to the neoconservative movement. So the new right would be a new source of conservative political support. And one region this was in was called the Sun Belt. And the Sun Belt's generally the south of the United States. So think like Florida basically across the south to California. And we don't typically think of California as a conservative state, especially in modern times. However, California has had a conservative bent at times. And even if you take out some of the more urban areas, Northern California and rural California is still fairly conservative. But the Sun Belt had an influence in the lead up to the election of 1980. Now, honestly, one of the main things that's going on in the election of 1980 is America doesn't like Jimmy Carter, and they're really going to vote for anyone who isn't Jimmy Carter. Basically, to win the election of 1980, all you have to do is not be Jimmy Carter. And so then you have this conservative group that's ready to rally behind the Republican candidate, and that's in the Sun Belt. They're angry about restrictions the government has been passing or enacting. One such would be the 55 mile per hour speed limit that it used to be. It's not currently the case anymore, but it used to be the speed limit had to be 55 miles per hour among all the states. And that was partially to conserve gas because oil prices were so high and we were having issues with foreign oil sources that the federal government thought that if we enacted a 55 mile per hour speed limit, it would limit petroleum consumption enough to have an impact on gas prices and on gas availability. And people in the Sun Belt did not like the government telling them that their state had to enact a 55 mile per hour speed limit or risk losing federal funding. So they were mad about that. And then there was also suburban conservatism, where generally urban areas tend to lean more toward the left and rural areas tend to lean more toward the right. And suburban America was pushing more toward the right because it's not strictly urban. Also, there was the religious movements, evangelicalism, evangelical Christianity always has tended to be conservative. However, there's a very strong concerted effort among evangelicals to push for a conservative candidate in the 1980 presidential election. And so we get the Christian right, and this is made up largely just of conservatives. And we see, whereas there had been some tension between those who would be Protestant and Catholic, we see some of that tension kind of disappear because it's the concept of the enemy of my enemy is my friend. And so if the Catholic Church was pushing for conservatism and conservative views, particularly if they're rebelling against the idea of Roe v. Wade, which they see as a more liberal government having enacted through the courts, obviously, then the Protestant conservative right is willing to ally themselves with the conservative Catholic right in order to defeat what they would see as a liberal government. Also, we have what was called the moral majority, and this is a group of evangelical Christians who gather together and politically align themselves with the right, politically speaking. And so the moral majority movement was, it was somewhat akin to the Tea Party. I don't know if you guys remember the Tea Party, not the Boston Tea Party, the political Tea Party, which was a movement during the Obama administration. And it was a conservative political movement. Similarly, the moral majority is a religious and it's a religious and political movement, conservative movement. So the moral majority puts a lot of political force behind the Republican candidate, who happens to be Ronald Reagan. So America's looking for just an upstanding, moral, conservative candidate for president. And Ronald Reagan has a lot going for him. First of all, he's well known. He was an actor in Hollywood. I'm not necessarily recommending the movie, not because it has anything morally objectionable, but it might not be up your alley. But one Ronald Reagan movie is Bringing Up Baby. He was in a lot of movies, but it's kind of a comedy movie where he adopts a monkey as a child, and then hires a babysitter for it. It's intriguing. I've watched it, and it's somewhat entertaining, but it has historical value because it's a president who was an actor in the movie. He was an actor. He originally was a Democrat and then switched parties later in life and became conservative. A very strong conservative, was a governor of California, which is going to cause him, generally, if you're a governor of a state, you win your state when you run in a presidential election, and the population of California is dramatically increasing. So we're going to see that has a lot of force. He's also very good at bipartisanship. So Ronald Reagan, while he's a very strong conservative, he has no trouble working across both sides of the aisle. And even before he's president, he just has a very strong, charismatic personality that really carries him through the election. It's very hard not to like Ronald Reagan. I mean, basically, almost everybody loved Ronald Reagan. Obviously not the person that tried to assassinate him. But beyond that, almost everybody loved Ronald Reagan. And almost everybody disliked Jimmy Carter. We talked about in our live lesson, his approval rating was around 26% at its lowest. That's excessively low. It's the fourth lowest ever for a president. And when the 1980 election occurs, and it's Jimmy Carter, the man who presided over America when there was really high interest rates, really high inflation, high oil prices, low oil availability, economic just stagnation. And then also he's the president who couldn't free our hostages that were being held in Iran. 53 American hostages were held for 444 days. That's the guy. You can vote for him, or you can vote for anyone else, and that anyone else would be Ronald Reagan. So in this election, Ronald Reagan wins all but 6 states. Now, D.C., I'm counting D.C. 5 states in D.C., Ronald Reagan loses. All right? So Ronald Reagan wins 489 electoral votes to Jimmy Carter's 49 electoral votes. So that just shows you what America's feeling right now. Now, if you're looking at numbers in the popular vote, I want to say it's like an 11% spread. That's still really big, and it's going to get bigger when Ronald Reagan runs again. But Ronald Reagan just decimates Jimmy Carter in this election, largely because America's sick of the Carter administration. They're sick of the stagnant economy. And here's a charismatic man whom everyone knows saying, I can fix this. All right, so that's how the moral majority and the new right, including the Sun Belt, helps push Ronald Reagan to the forefront via new conservatism. All right, that is it for today. And then we are going to meet again on Monday. If you have any questions in the interim, make sure you reach out via email. Reach out anytime. I'll answer any question you have. Otherwise, good work and keep up with your exam prep. Have a great weekend, everybody.